Donald McKinnon came home unannounced. Nobody knew he was back. The house in Westchester had been silent for 18 months. But then he heard something. A sound coming from somewhere inside. His heart started racing. He didn't know what it was. He moved toward it, following the noise, his hands trembling. It was coming from the kitchen. He pushed open the door and what he saw stopped his heart. Donald McKinnon was a billionaire. Commercial logistics, self-made. He built distribution hubs that connected ports from Savannah to Long Beach. Private rail contracts that moved freight across 12 states. Everything he touched turned profitable. But money couldn't bring back what he'd lost. His wife, Colleen, died in a winter pileup on Interstate 90 outside Cleveland. She was driving back from visiting her mother in Erie. Ice, fog, 18 vehicles. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. Donald was in Chicago negotiating a terminal contract when he got the call. At her funeral, something broke inside his 3 daughters. Karen, Emily, and Laura. 4 years old. Identical triplets. Blonde curls, blue eyes, dimples in their cheeks. They stopped talking, all 3, at the same time. Karen used to narrate everything she saw. Emily asked questions about every single thing. Laura sang made-up songs while coloring. Now, nothing. Silence. 18 months of complete silence. No words, no laughter, no crying out loud. Just 3 little girls holding each other's hands, staring at nothing like they'd made a pact with grief. Donald spent millions trying to fix it. Trauma specialists from Boston, pediatric neurologists at Johns Hopkins, a child development institute outside Palo Alto, a retreat center in Sedona. He took them to California, to Montana, to the Outer Banks. He bought them puppies, built them a playhouse with turrets and slides. Nothing worked. The girls stayed locked inside themselves, silent together, like they'd agreed never to come back. So Donald did what broken men do. He ran. He buried himself in work. 16-hour days, business trips every other week. Seattle, Dallas, Norfolk, Tacoma. Because sitting in that house felt like drowning. His estate in Westchester had 12 bedrooms, vaulted ceilings, a kitchen designed for magazine spreads, but it was the loneliest place on earth. One evening, Evelyn Rhodes, the head housekeeper who'd been with the family for 15 years, approached him. "Mr. McKinnon, I can't manage this alone anymore. The house is too big. The girls need more help than I can give. Can I hire someone?" Donald barely looked up. "Hire whoever you need, Evelyn." 3 days later, Kimberly Walmsley walked through the door. 32 years old, from Scranton, studying early childhood education at night while working 2 jobs. Her grandmother had just died after 3 years of hospice care. Kimberly had been the one who stayed, who held her hand, who sang to her when the morphine wasn't enough. She understood grief. She knew what it felt like to keep breathing when your heart was broken. Donald saw Kimberly once in the hallway. She was carrying folded linens. She nodded. He didn't even look at her. But his daughters noticed. Kimberly didn't try to fix them. She didn't force them to talk or smile or be okay. She just showed up every single day, folding laundry, humming old church hymns while she worked, cleaning their rooms, being present. And slowly, the girls started coming closer. In the first week, Karen watched from the doorway while Kimberly made the beds. Then Emily. Then Laura. In the second week, Kimberly hummed softly while organizing toys. Laura crept closer, just listening. In the third week, Emily left a crayon drawing on the clean laundry. A purple butterfly. Kimberly picked it up like it was precious. She smiled and taped it to the wall beside the window. "This is beautiful, sweetheart," she whispered. And Emily's eyes flickered, just a little. Week after week, something was happening. Something quiet, something sacred, something Donald never saw because he was never home. The girls started whispering to Kimberly, then talking in sentences, then laughing while she folded towels. By 6 weeks, they were singing again. Kimberly didn't announce it. She just loved them gently, patiently, like watering a garden and trusting God to bring the growth. Donald had no idea his daughters were coming back to life. He was in Seattle finalizing a port expansion deal. Exhausted, stressed. He wasn't supposed to come home for 3 more days. But something inside him said go. He didn't call ahead. He just booked a flight and left. When he walked through the front door on Thursday afternoon in early May, the house was quiet. Like always, he expected nothing different, but then he heard something. Sounds. His chest tightened. He stood frozen in the entryway, listening. It couldn't be. The house had been silent for 18 months. But the sounds were real. Laughter. Children's laughter. Donald's hands started shaking. His heart pounded. He didn't understand. He moved toward the sound, down the hallway, faster. His breath caught in his throat. It was coming from the kitchen. He reached the door. His hand trembled as he pushed it open. And what he saw inside stopped his entire world. Before you see what Donald saw in that kitchen, I want you to ask yourself something. If you've ever felt invisible, abandoned, or like someone walked away when you needed them most, this story is for you. And if you don't subscribe now, you'll miss what happens next, because this channel is where broken things come back to life. If that doesn't matter to you, don't subscribe. But if it does, you know what to do. Now let me tell you what Donald saw in that kitchen. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, bright and warm, the kind of light that makes everything feel alive. Laura was sitting on Kimberly's shoulders, her little hands tangled in the woman's hair, giggling uncontrollably. Karen and Emily sat barefoot on the counter by the sink, legs swinging, faces glowing. They were singing, actually singing, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Their voices filled the room like music Donald had forgotten existed. Kimberly was folding small bright dresses, humming along with them, smiling like this was the most natural thing in the world. The girls were wearing matching burnt orange outfits. Their hair was brushed and tied with ribbons. Their cheeks were flushed with joy. They looked alive. Donald stood frozen in the doorway. His briefcase had fallen from his hand somewhere behind him. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His daughters, talking, laughing, singing. For 3 seconds, something broke open inside him. Relief so powerful it felt like his chest might cave in. Gratitude, joy, a feeling he hadn't felt since Colleen died. Like maybe, just maybe, God hadn't forgotten them. Then Laura shouted, louder, "Miss Kimberly, sing louder." And something shifted. Donald didn't understand it. He couldn't name it, but it rose up fast and hot and ugly. Jealousy, shame, rage. This woman, this stranger, she had done what he couldn't. She'd brought his daughters back from the dead. While he was closing deals and flying across the country, she was here. Loving them, healing them, being the parent he should have been. And he hated her for it. What the hell is going on here? His voice exploded across the kitchen like a gunshot. The singing stopped. Instantly, Laura's face crumpled. Kimberly stumbled, her hands shaking as she carefully lifted Laura off her shoulders and set her down. Karen and Emily froze on the counter, their legs stopping mid-swing. "Mr. McKinnon, Kimberly's voice was quiet, steady, but Donald could see her trembling. "This is completely inappropriate," Donald's voice cracked. "You were hired to clean. Not to play dress up and turn my kitchen into some kind of daycare circus." Kimberly lowered her eyes. "I was just spending time with them, sir." "They were. I don't want to hear it." Donald's face was red, his fists clenched at his sides. "Putting my daughters on counters. Carrying them around like that. What if one of them fell? What if something happened?" "Nothing happened, sir. I was being careful." "You're fired." The word came out cold. Final. "Pack your things. Leave now." Kimberly stood there for a moment, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just nodded. "Yes, sir." She walked past Donald with her head high, shoulders straight, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. The girls didn't make a sound. They climbed down from the counter slowly, carefully, holding each other's hands. Their faces were blank, empty, like someone had reached inside and turned off a switch. They looked at their father. Really looked at him. And Donald saw it. Fear. They were afraid of him. The funeral was on a Wednesday in late October. Gray sky, cold wind, the kind of day that made everything feel heavier than it should. Donald stood at the graveside in Larchmont, watching the casket lower into the ground, and felt nothing. Not because he didn't love Colleen, but because his mind couldn't process what was happening. She'd been alive 4 days earlier, laughing on the phone while he reviewed contracts in his hotel room, telling him about Laura's new fascination with caterpillars, reminding him to pick up milk on his way home. Now she was gone. The girls stood beside him in matching black dresses. Karen, Emily, and Laura. 4 years old, too young to understand forever. They didn't cry during the service. They just held hands and stared at the flowers piled around the grave. Donald thought that was normal. Shock, the grief counselor had said. Children process loss differently. But that night, something changed. Donald tucked them into bed like Colleen used to. 3 twin beds arranged in a row in the same room because the girls refused to sleep apart. He read them Goodnight Moon, stumbling over words he'd never had to read before because Colleen had always handled bedtime. When he finished, he kissed each of their foreheads. Good night, Karen. Good night, Emily. Good night, Laura. He waited for them to say it back. They always said it back. But they didn't. They just stared at him with wide, unblinking eyes. Donald tried again the next morning. He made breakfast, pancakes, Colleen's recipe, though his came out too thick and slightly burned. He set plates in front of each girl. Karen, do you want syrup? Nothing. Emily, orange juice or milk? Silence. Laura, are you hungry? Laura looked down at her plate and said nothing. Donald's chest tightened. Girls, I need you to talk to me. They exchanged glances. Karen reached for Emily's hand. Emily reached for Laura's. They sat there, connected, silent, like they'd made a decision he wasn't part of. Donald felt panic rising. By the 3rd day, he was frantic. He called their pediatrician, Dr. Ramsey, who'd known the girls since birth. It's trauma, Mr. McKinnon. Give them time. They'll come around. But they didn't come around. A week passed. Then 2. Then a month. Donald tried everything he could think of. He played their favorite movies, set out their favorite toys, took them to the park where Colleen used to push them on the swings. Nothing. They moved through the house like ghosts, eating when told, sleeping when told, but never speaking, never laughing, never crying out loud. They only communicated with each other. Looks, gestures, a language Donald couldn't understand. He'd watch them from the doorway of their room at night, huddled together in one bed even though he'd tucked them into separate ones, holding each other like they were the only solid things left in the world. And Donald realized something that gutted him. They didn't need him. They had each other. And that was enough. The house in Westchester started to feel different. It had always been big. 12 bedrooms, vaulted ceilings, windows that overlooked acres of manicured lawn. Colleen had loved it, called it their dream home, filled it with pictures and plants and the constant noise of children playing. But now it felt like a mausoleum. Donald would walk through the hallways and hear nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just the hum of central air and the ticking of clocks. He'd stand in the kitchen where Colleen used to sing while cooking and feel the silence pressing down on him like a physical weight. The guilt started then. Not just guilt over Colleen's death, though that was there too. Guilt over every moment he'd missed before she died. All those business trips, all those late nights at the office, all those times Colleen had called and he'd let it go to voicemail because he was in a meeting. He'd told himself he was building something for his family, securing their future, but the truth was simpler and uglier. He'd been hiding from the messiness of parenting. Hiding from the chaos of 3 toddlers who needed constant attention. Hiding behind work because it was easier than being present. And now Colleen was gone. And his daughters wouldn't even look at him. 3 months after the funeral, Donald couldn't take it anymore. He booked a flight to Dallas. Told himself it was necessary. An investor meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. But it wasn't necessary. He just needed to leave. Evelyn Rhodes, The housekeeper, who'd been with the family since before the girls were born, stood in the hallway as he packed his suitcase. "How long will you be gone, Mr. McKinnon?" 3 days, maybe 4. Evelyn's face was carefully neutral, but Donald saw the judgment in her eyes. "The girls will be fine," he said, more to himself than to her. Evelyn nodded. "Of course, sir." But as Donald walked out the door, suitcase in hand, he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it. Crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just soft, broken sobs coming from upstairs. Donald froze. He should go back. He should drop the suitcase and run upstairs and hold his daughters and tell them he was sorry. But he didn't. He kept walking. Because if he stopped, if he let himself feel what they were feeling, he'd fall apart completely. And Donald McKinnon couldn't afford to fall apart. So he got in the car. And he left. And when he came back 4 days later, the house was even quieter than before. That's when Donald made a decision. Silence wasn't something you lived with. It was something you fixed. And if love couldn't fix it, maybe money could. The first specialist Donald flew to was in Boston. Dr. Henrietta Voss, child psychologist, Harvard trained. Her office overlooked the Charles River and cost $400 an hour. She spent 90 minutes with the girls in a room full of toys and soft lighting while Donald waited outside, pacing. When she finally emerged, her face was professionally sympathetic. "Mr. McKinnon, your daughters are experiencing what we call selective mutism. It's a trauma response. They've chosen silence as a way to maintain control in a world that feels chaotic and unsafe." Donald leaned forward. "How do we fix it?" Dr. Voss hesitated. "Time, consistency, therapy, but there are no guarantees." Donald heard nothing after no guarantees. 2 weeks later, he took them to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. Dr. Raymond Pelletier, pediatric neurologist, 30 years of experience. His waiting room had certificates covering every wall. He ran tests, brain scans, hearing evaluations, speech assessments. Everything came back normal. "There's nothing physically wrong with them," Dr. Pelletier said. "This is psychological, traumatic bonding. They've created a shared coping mechanism. Breaking through it will require intensive intervention." Donald nodded. "Whatever it takes." But intensive intervention meant months of appointments. Play therapy, art therapy, group sessions. The girls sat through it all silently. Drawing pictures they wouldn't explain. Playing with dolls they wouldn't name. Staring at therapists who asked gentle questions they refused to answer. Nothing changed. Donald kept flying. Boston to Baltimore. Baltimore to Palo Alto, where a developmental institute promised breakthrough techniques. The institute was beautiful. Glass walls, gardens, therapy dogs wandering the grounds. Dr. Claudia Brenner, the director, was confident. "We specialize in childhood trauma. We've seen cases like this before. With the right approach, we can help them find their voices again." Donald wrote a check for $20,000. The girls spent 2 weeks there. Donald visited once, stayed for an hour, then flew to Seattle for a logistics meeting he could have handled over the phone. When the girls came home, they were exactly the same. Silent, connected, unreachable. Donald's frustration turned to rage. Not at the girls, at himself, at the universe, at the fact that all his money, all his power, all his connections meant nothing. He couldn't fix this, and if he couldn't fix it, what good was any of it? His work schedule intensified. Seattle, Dallas, Norfolk, Tacoma. He told himself he was maintaining the business, protecting the family's financial future. But the truth was simpler. He was running. The girls turned 5, then 6, then 7. They grew taller. Their faces lost the roundness of toddlers and took on sharper, more defined features. Their blonde curls grew longer. But they never got louder. They moved through the house like a single unit, eating meals together, playing quietly in their room, sleeping tangled in one bed. Donald would come home between trips and find them exactly where he'd left them. Unchanged, frozen, like time had stopped the day Colleen died. Evelyn Rhodes watched it all with increasing concern. She'd been the house manager since before the girls were born. She'd helped Colleen pick out nursery furniture. She'd been there the night Donald brought Colleen home from the hospital with 3 tiny babies wrapped in pink blankets. And she'd watched this family fall apart. One evening, after Donald returned from a week in Dallas, Evelyn found him in his study staring at financial reports he wasn't really reading. She knocked softly on the doorframe. "Mr. McKinnon, may I speak with you?" Donald looked up, exhausted. "What is it, Evelyn?" She stepped inside, her hands folded in front of her. "I'm worried about the girls." Donald's jaw tightened. "They're fine. They're seeing the best doctors in the country." Evelyn shook her head. "That's not what I mean, sir. The house, it's too quiet. Too empty. The girls need more than doctors and therapists. They need," she paused, searching for the right words. "They need life around them. Warmth. Presence." Donald's face hardened. "I'm doing everything I can. I know you are, sir. But you're not here. And when you are here, She stopped herself. "I'm what?" Evelyn met his eyes. "Absent even when you're present." The words hit like a punch. Donald stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Is there something specific you need, Evelyn?" She took a breath. "I can't manage this house alone anymore, sir. It's too big. The girls need more attention than I can give them. I'd like permission to hire additional help." Donald turned away, staring out the window at the dark lawn. He thought about his daughters. About the silence that had become normal. About the way they looked through him like he was made of glass. He thought about Colleen. About what she would say if she could see them now. And he thought about himself. About the fact that throwing money at the problem hadn't worked. About the fact that nothing had worked. Maybe Evelyn was right. Maybe the house needed something different. Not another specialist. Not another therapy program. Just someone. Someone who could be there when he couldn't. Someone who could fill the silence he'd helped create. Donald's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "Hire whoever you need, Evelyn." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you, sir." She turned to leave, then paused. "Mr. McKinnon?" "Yes?" "The girls still ask about you. In their own way. They leave drawings on your desk. They wait by the window when they know you're coming home." Donald's throat tightened. "They still love you," Evelyn said softly. "Even if they can't say it." She left before he could respond. Donald stood alone in his study, surrounded by everything his money had built, and felt more powerless than he'd ever felt in his life. 3 days later, Evelyn called from the kitchen. "Mr. McKinnon, I found someone. She starts Monday." Donald barely looked up from his laptop. "Fine. Whatever you think is best." He didn't ask for a name. Didn't ask for a background check. Didn't ask anything. Because he'd stopped believing anyone could help. He was wrong. Kimberly Walmsley arrived on a Monday morning in late March. The sky was overcast, threatening rain but not quite delivering. She stood at the front gate of the McKinnon estate, her worn duffel bag slung over one shoulder, staring up at the house. It was bigger than she'd expected. Bigger than anything in Scranton. Evelyn met her at the door, sharp-eyed and efficient. "You're Kimberly?" "Yes, ma'am." Evelyn looked her over. Kimberly was 32 but looked younger. Brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup. Clothes clean but clearly secondhand. Hands that showed work. "You've done housekeeping before?" "Yes, ma'am. And caregiving. I looked after my grandmother for 3 years before she passed." Evelyn's expression softened slightly. "Hospice?" Kimberly nodded. "Stage 4 lung cancer. She died in January." "I'm sorry." Kimberly didn't respond to that. She'd heard it too many times. Sorry didn't bring people back. Evelyn led her inside, through hallways that echoed with emptiness. "The house is large. You'll be responsible for cleaning, laundry, and helping with the girls when needed." Evelyn paused, searching for the right word. "They're special. They don't talk. Haven't spoken in over a year. Mr. McKinnon travels frequently. I need someone who can be patient. Who won't push." Kimberly looked at her steadily. "I understand." Evelyn studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Your room is on the 3rd floor. You start tomorrow." That night, Kimberly lay in her small room under the eaves and thought about her grandmother. The way she'd stopped speaking in the final weeks. Not because she couldn't, but because words felt too heavy. Kimberly had learned to sit beside her in silence, to hold her hand, to hum old hymns her grandmother had sung to her when she was little. Sometimes silence wasn't the problem. Sometimes silence was the only safe place left. The next morning, Kimberly started work. She cleaned quietly, vacuumed the endless hallways, dusted furniture that looked like it had never been touched, folded laundry in the large utility room off the kitchen. And while she worked, she hummed. Nothing loud, nothing intentional, just the songs that lived in her chest. Amazing Grace, I'll Fly Away, old hymns her grandmother used to hum while cooking. She didn't notice the girls at first, but they noticed her. Karen stood in the doorway of the laundry room, watching. Her blonde hair hung loose around her face. Her eyes were cautious, measuring. Kimberly glanced up, saw her, and smiled. "Good morning, sweetheart." Karen didn't respond, just stared. Kimberly went back to folding towels. A few minutes later, Emily appeared beside her sister. Then Laura. 3 identical girls, 7 years old, standing in a row like sentries. Kimberly kept folding, kept humming. She didn't ask them questions. Didn't try to engage, just let them be. After 10 minutes, the girls disappeared as silently as they'd come. This became the pattern. Kimberly would work. The girls would watch, sometimes from doorways, sometimes from the top of the stairs, sometimes sitting cross-legged on the floor just outside whatever room Kimberly was cleaning. Kimberly never pushed, never commented, just continued her routines, humming while she swept, singing softly while she cooked simple meals in the kitchen, moving through the house like she belonged there. On the 4th day, something shifted. Kimberly was making beds in the girls' room when Emily walked in. She didn't say anything, just climbed onto the bed Kimberly had just finished and sat there, watching. Kimberly smiled. "You want to help?" Emily didn't answer. Kimberly handed her a pillow. "Can you fluff this for me?" Emily took it, held it, then carefully fluffed it and placed it at the head of the bed. Kimberly's heart swelled, but she kept her voice casual. "Perfect. Thank you, sweetheart." Emily's lips twitched, almost a smile. The next day, all 3 girls were in the room when Kimberly arrived. They watched as she stripped the sheets, as she shook out fresh ones, as she tucked in corners with practiced precision. Then Karen stepped forward and picked up a pillowcase. She looked at Kimberly, a question in her eyes. "You want to help with that one?" Karen nodded. Together, they dressed the pillow. Karen's small hands working carefully, seriously, like this was the most important task in the world. When they finished, Kimberly patted her shoulder. "You're a good helper." Karen didn't smile, but something in her face softened. A week passed. Then 2. The girls started leaving things for Kimberly. Small things. A hair ribbon on the counter. A crayon drawing tucked into a stack of folded laundry. A toy bunny placed carefully on her pillow. Kimberly treasured each one. Taped the drawings to the wall in her room. Wore the ribbon in her hair. Set the bunny on her nightstand. She didn't make a big deal of it. Didn't announce it to anyone. Just quietly acknowledged each gift with a smile and a whispered thank you. The girls noticed. 3 weeks in, Kimberly was in the kitchen making lunch. Grilled cheese sandwiches. Simple, nothing fancy. She hummed while she worked. Some old folk song she barely remembered the words to. Laura appeared beside her, climbed onto a stool, watched the sandwiches sizzling in the pan. Kimberly glanced at her. "You hungry?" Laura nodded. Kimberly flipped a sandwich. The cheese oozed out the sides, golden and perfect. And then Laura did something she hadn't done in 18 months. She giggled. It was so quiet Kimberly almost missed it. Just a tiny sound, a breath of laughter. But it was there. Kimberly's hands froze. Her heart pounded. She didn't turn, didn't react, didn't make Laura feel like she'd done something monumental. She just kept cooking. But inside, something cracked wide open. Because for the first time in 18 months, one of Donald McKinnon's daughters had made a sound. And it was the beginning of everything. The first real word came on a Thursday afternoon in mid-April. Kimberly was folding laundry in the sunroom, warm light streaming through the windows. The girls sat nearby, playing with a puzzle they'd dragged from their room. Laura looked up, studying Kimberly's face for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Miss Kimberly." 2 words, quiet as a breath, but unmistakable. Kimberly's hands stilled on the towel she was folding. She looked at Laura and smiled, keeping her voice calm even though her heart was racing. "Yes, sweetheart?" Laura pointed at the puzzle piece in her hand. "This one doesn't fit." Kimberly crossed the room and knelt beside her. "Let's see." Together, they found where the piece belonged. And just like that, the wall had cracked a little wider. By the next week, all 3 girls were speaking to Kimberly. Not constantly, not loudly, but in whispers and half-sentences that grew bolder each day. Emily asked questions while Kimberly cooked. "Why do eggs turn white when you cook them? Where does flour come from?" Karen told stories while Kimberly brushed her hair. Made up tales about princesses and dragons and girls who could fly. Laura sang fragments of songs she remembered from before. Songs Colleen used to sing. Kimberly listened to all of it, answered every question, laughed at every story, hummed along with every song. But she didn't celebrate, didn't make announcements, didn't treat their words like miracles. She just accepted them, naturally, like they'd been speaking all along. Because the moment you made something special, you made it fragile. And these girls needed to feel like their voices were normal, safe, theirs to use whenever they wanted. Evelyn noticed. She'd come into a room and hear whispers. See the girls giggling while Kimberly braided their hair. Watch them singing together while setting the table for dinner. One evening, Evelyn found Kimberly in the kitchen after the girls had gone to bed. "They're talking," Evelyn said quietly. Kimberly looked up from the dishes she was washing. "A little, yes." Evelyn's eyes were wet. "Do you know what this means? What you've done?" Kimberly shook her head. "I haven't done anything. They were always there. They just needed time." Evelyn studied her for a long moment. "Mr. McKinnon should know." Kimberly's hands stilled in the soapy water. "He's their father," Evelyn continued. "He's been trying to help them for years. He deserves to know they're healing." Kimberly turned, drying her hands on a towel. "If he's here, he'll know. But I'm not going to tell him over the phone. This isn't something you announce. It's something you witness." Evelyn nodded slowly. "You're right." She started to leave, then paused. "He's in Seattle this week. He won't be back until Sunday." Kimberly went back to the dishes. "Then he'll see when he gets home." But Donald didn't wait until Sunday. In Seattle, sitting in a hotel conference room overlooking Puget Sound, Donald found himself unable to focus. The logistics director was presenting quarterly projections. Numbers that should have mattered. Contracts worth millions. But Donald couldn't stop thinking about the house in Westchester. About his daughters. About how long it had been since he'd actually sat down with them. Actually tried. About the drawing he'd found on his desk before he left. 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. He didn't know which girl had drawn it. He didn't know what it meant. But something about it had lodged in his chest and wouldn't let go. The meeting ended at 4:30. Donald's assistant, Renee, found him staring out the window. "Mr. McKinnon, your flight home is Sunday at noon. Should I confirm the car?" Donald's jaw tightened. "Change it. Get me on a flight tonight." Renee blinked. "Tonight, sir?" "Yes. Now." She hesitated. "Is everything all right?" Donald didn't answer. Didn't know how to explain the pull he felt. The sudden, overwhelming need to go home. "Just book it," he said. "By 6 p.m." Donald was at SeaTac Airport boarding a red-eye to Newark. He didn't call ahead, didn't text Evelyn, just boarded the plane and sat in first class staring at nothing while the engines roared to life. He thought about Colleen, about the last conversation they'd had before she died. She'd been frustrated with him. He remembered that, frustrated that he was always gone, always choosing work over family. "You're going to wake up one day and realize you missed everything," she'd said. He'd brushed it off, promised he'd do better, made excuses about deadlines and deals that couldn't wait. And then she was gone. And he'd kept making the same excuses. The plane took off, climbing into the dark sky. Donald closed his eyes and made a silent promise. This time would be different. This time he'd stay. The flight landed at Newark at 7:15 a.m. Donald's driver, Warren, was waiting at arrivals, surprised to see him 2 days early. "Mr. McKinnon, I wasn't expecting you until, I know. Let's go." They drove in silence through early morning traffic, the city giving way to suburbs, suburbs giving way to the tree-lined roads of Westchester. Donald's stomach tightened as they approached the estate. He didn't know what he was expecting. Didn't know why he'd felt so compelled to come home early. He just knew he needed to be there. The car pulled through the gates at 8:45. Donald stepped out, briefcase in hand, and stood for a moment looking at the house. It looked the same as always. Grand, beautiful, empty. He walked up the front steps and pushed open the door. The house was quiet. Donald set his briefcase down and stood in the entryway, listening. And then he heard it. Laughter. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. His heart stopped. He moved toward the sound, his hands beginning to shake, his breath catching in his throat. It was coming from the kitchen. And Donald McKinnon, who'd spent 18 months drowning in silence, followed that sound like a man following light out of a cave. Donald stood in the hallway, frozen. The laughter was real. He wasn't imagining it. Children's voices, bright and unrestrained, coming from the kitchen. His children's voices. His heart hammered against his ribs. His hands trembled. He moved forward, each step feeling like it took forever. The kitchen door was half open. Donald pushed it wider. Sunlight flooded the room, pouring through the tall windows that overlooked the back lawn. Everything looked golden, alive, impossibly bright. Laura was perched on Kimberly's shoulders, her small hands tangled in the woman's dark hair, giggling so hard her whole body shook. Karen and Emily sat barefoot on the counter by the sink, legs swinging, faces flushed with joy. They were singing, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Their voices filled the kitchen, clear and sweet and completely unguarded. Kimberly was folding small dresses on the center island, humming along with them, smiling like this was the most natural thing in the world. The girls wore matching burnt orange outfits. Their blonde hair was brushed and tied with bright ribbons. Their cheeks glowed. Their eyes sparkled. They looked alive. Donald's briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. Nobody noticed. He stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe, watching his daughters laugh and sing like the last 18 months had never happened. For 3 seconds, pure relief flooded through him. Relief so powerful it felt like his chest might explode. Gratitude, joy, a feeling he'd forgotten existed. Thank God, they're okay. And then something else rose up. Something dark and ugly and fast. Jealousy. This woman, this stranger he'd barely looked at, she'd done what he couldn't do. While he was signing contracts and closing deals and flying across the country convincing himself he was doing it for them, she was here. Being the parent he should have been. Loving them, healing them, bringing them back from the dead. And they loved her for it. The realization hit him like a fist to the gut. His daughters were singing, but not for him. They were happy, but not because of him. He'd spent millions trying to fix them. Years searching for answers. And a maid from Scranton had done it in 6 weeks. What the hell is going on here? His voice exploded across the kitchen like a gunshot. The singing stopped. Instantly, Laura's smile vanished. Kimberly stumbled backward, her hands shaking as she carefully lifted Laura off her shoulders and set her on the floor. Karen and Emily froze on the counter, their legs stopping mid-swing. The room went silent. "Mr. McKinnon," Kimberly started, her voice quiet but steady. "I didn't know you were. This is completely inappropriate." Donald's voice cracked, his face flushed red. "You were hired to clean. Not to turn my kitchen into some kind of playground. Not to put my daughters on counters where they could fall and break their necks." Kimberly's hands gripped the edge of the counter. "Sir, I was being careful. They were just, I don't want to hear it." Donald's fists clenched at his sides. What if something had happened? What if one of them fell? Do you have any idea what kind of liability that is? Nothing happened, sir. They're perfectly safe. Donald pointed at Laura, still standing frozen beside Kimberly. She was on your shoulders. My daughter. On your shoulders like some kind of circus act. Karen started to climb down from the counter, her movements slow and careful. Emily followed, both girls reaching for each other's hands. Donald's voice rose higher. This is my house. These are my children. And you're just, Donald's throat tightened. His vision blurred. You're fired. The words hung in the air. Kimberly's face went pale. Mr. McKinnon, please. The girls, they've been. Pack your things. Leave, now. Kimberly looked at the girls. At Karen and Emily standing together by the counter, their faces blank. At Laura, whose eyes were filling with tears. Kimberly's own eyes were wet, but she didn't argue. Didn't beg. She just nodded. Yes, sir. She walked past Donald, her head high, her shoulders straight, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The girls watched her go. They didn't make a sound. They climbed down from the counter slowly, carefully, holding each other's hands like they were the only solid things left in the world. Their faces emptied, just like that, like someone had reached inside and flipped a switch. They looked at their father. Really looked at him, and Donald saw it. Fear. They weren't looking at him like he was their protector, their provider, their father. They were looking at him like he was dangerous. Karen's hand tightened around Emily's. Emily's tightened around Laura's. The triplets stood in a row, silent, connected, shut down. Just like they'd been for 18 months. Donald opened his mouth to say something. To explain. To make them understand. But no words came. The kitchen was silent again. The sunlight still poured through the windows. The burnt orange dresses still glowed. The ribbons still hung in their hair. But the light was gone from their faces. The joy was gone. Everything was gone. Donald stood alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of what he'd just destroyed, and felt the silence close in around him like water filling his lungs. Upstairs, a door closed. Kimberly was packing. The girls turned and walked out of the kitchen without a word, their bare feet padding softly against the tile. Donald didn't stop them. He just stood there, his hands shaking, his chest heaving, staring at the half-folded dresses on the counter. At the bright ribbons, at the abandoned puzzle pieces scattered on the floor, and the silence, that terrible, suffocating silence he'd been trying to escape for 18 months, settled back into the house like it had never left. Right here is where most people turn away. When something good gets destroyed and it's too uncomfortable to watch. If you're the kind of person who stays, who doesn't abandon a story when it gets painful, subscribe now. And if you're not, tell me in the comments why walking away feels easier. The house felt different after Kimberly left. Not quieter. It had always been quiet. But emptier. Like something vital had been removed and the whole structure was collapsing inward. Donald tried to talk to the girls that afternoon. He found them in their room, sitting on the floor in a tight circle, holding hands. Their eyes were open but unfocused, staring at nothing. Girls, he said from the doorway. Can we talk? They didn't look at him. I know you're upset. I know you liked Miss Kimberly. But what she was doing, it wasn't safe. I was protecting you. Nothing. Karen, Emily, Laura, please. Look at me. Karen's grip tightened on her sister's hands. That was the only response. Donald stood there for 5 minutes. Then 10. They never moved, never acknowledged him. Finally, he left. He tried again at dinner. Set plates in front of them. Pasta with butter, something simple they used to like. They ate mechanically, eyes down, silent. Donald watched them, his chest tight. You were singing this morning, he said quietly. I heard you. You sounded beautiful. Laura's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Then continued. I didn't mean to scare you. I was surprised. I didn't know you could, that you were. He stopped. The words felt hollow even as he said them. The girls finished eating without a word, carried their plates to the sink, left the kitchen in a silent line. Donald sat alone at the table, staring at his untouched food. By 8 o'clock, The house was dark except for the light in Donald's study. He sat behind his desk, a glass of bourbon in his hand, staring at the photo of Colleen that sat on the credenza. She was laughing in the picture, taken at some charity gala years ago. Before the girls were born. Before everything fell apart. "What would you say if you could see me now?" he whispered to the photo. A knock on the doorframe made him look up. Evelyn stood there, her face drawn and tired. "Mr. McKinnon, may I speak with you?" Donald gestured to the chair across from him. She sat down slowly, her hands folded in her lap. "You made a mistake today," she said quietly. Donald's jaw tightened. "I was protecting them. From what? From joy? From laughter? From the first person who's made them feel safe since their mother died." Donald's hand clenched around the glass. She was being reckless. They were on the counter. Laura was on her shoulders. Evelyn's voice was firm but not unkind. "Those girls have been silent for 18 months. Today they were singing, and you destroyed it. This is the moment where silence becomes damage. Where doing nothing hurts more than doing the wrong thing. If you've ever watched someone suffer and said nothing, this channel exists to remind you what that costs. Subscribe if you believe presence matters. If you don't, explain yourself in the comments." Donald set the glass down hard. "I didn't destroy anything. I was being a responsible parent." "Were you?" Evelyn leaned forward. "Where have you been for the last 6 weeks, Mr. McKinnon?" Donald's face flushed. "I've been working, providing for this family. You've been hiding, just like you've been hiding since Colleen died." The words hit like a slap. Donald stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Evelyn stood too, meeting his eyes. "Those girls have been talking for weeks. Full sentences, songs, stories, and you had no idea because you were never here." Donald's breath caught. "Weeks? Yes, weeks." Kimberly didn't announce it because she knew it was fragile. She knew they needed time. But they were healing, Mr. McKinnon. They were coming back. Donald sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. "And now?" Evelyn's voice softened. "Now they're terrified. They watched their father fire the only person who's made them feel safe. They watched you choose anger over love." "I didn't," Donald's voice broke. "I didn't mean to, but you did." Silence filled the study. Donald looked up at Evelyn, his eyes red. "They were afraid of me. In the kitchen. I saw it in their faces. They were afraid." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Yes, they were." Donald's throat tightened. "Colleen would hate me right now." Evelyn's expression softened. "Colleen would want you to fix it." "How?" Donald spread his hands helplessly. "How do I fix this?" "You bring her back." Donald shook his head. "She'll never come back. Not after what I said." "Then you convince her. You apologize. You do whatever it takes." Donald stared at the desk. At the files and contracts that suddenly felt meaningless. What if she won't listen? Evelyn stood to leave. "Then you keep trying. Because those girls upstairs? They need her. And whether you want to admit it or not, so do you." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Donald sat alone in the silence. He thought about the kitchen that morning. About the laughter that had stopped the moment he spoke. About the fear in his daughter's eyes. About Kimberly walking past him with her head high, tears on her cheeks, fired for the crime of loving his children. He thought about Colleen. About the promise he'd made on the plane. That this time would be different. That this time he'd stay. He'd been home less than 4 hours and he'd already destroyed everything. Donald pulled out his phone and opened a search for Kimberly Walmsley, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Nothing useful came up. He called Evelyn. "Do you have Kimberly's address?" A pause. "Yes. Text it to me. Mr. McKinnon, it's late. Maybe you should wait until. Text it to me now." Another pause. Then his phone buzzed. An address in Yonkers. An apartment building. Donald stood up, grabbed his jacket. He didn't know what he was going to say. Didn't know if she'd even open the door. But he had to try. Because his daughters were upstairs, silent and afraid. And it was his fault. And for the first time in 18 months, Donald McKinnon was going to face what he'd broken instead of running from it. Most people never knock. They apologize in their heads and call it growth. If you believe real accountability means showing up even when you're ashamed, subscribe now. And if you think saying, sorry, without action is enough, I want to hear that in the comments. Donald called Kimberly's number 3 times that night. Each time, it went straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. What could he say? Sorry, I destroyed the only good thing that's happened to my daughters in 18 months? By 10:30, he was in his car driving to Yonkers. The address Evelyn had given him led to a modest apartment complex on the south side. 4 stories. Brick. Functional but worn. Donald parked and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the building. He'd closed deals worth hundreds of millions. Negotiated contracts with some of the most powerful people in the country. Stood in boardrooms and commanded respect with a single word. But sitting here, about to knock on the door of a woman he'd wronged, he felt powerless. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Found apartment 3C. Raised his hand to knock. Hesitated. Then knocked. Footsteps inside. A pause. Then the door opened a crack, the chain still engaged. Kimberly's face appeared. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. Mr. McKinnon. Her voice was flat, guarded. I need to talk to you. There's nothing to talk about. Please. Just 5 minutes. Kimberly stared at him for a long moment. Then closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it wider. She didn't invite him in. Just stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Donald pulled a small envelope from his jacket pocket. The girls made these. Before this morning. I found them in my study. He held out the envelope. Kimberly took it slowly, opened it. Inside were 3 drawings. Crayon on construction paper. The first showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Above them, written in careful child handwriting, was Miss Kimberly. The second was a garden full of flowers. Purple and red and orange. At the bottom, someone had written, "We love you." The third was a butterfly. Bright blue wings. Nothing else. Kimberly's hands trembled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. They stopped talking again, Donald said quietly. The moment you left, it's like someone flipped a switch. They won't look at me. Won't speak. They're exactly like they were before you came. His voice cracked. I did that. I destroyed it. And I don't know how to fix it. Kimberly wiped her eyes but didn't speak. Donald took a breath. I was wrong. About everything. You weren't being reckless. You were being present. Something I've never been. And when I saw you with them, saw how much they loved you, He stopped, searching for words. I felt replaced. And instead of being grateful, I got angry. Kimberly's voice was quiet. They don't need me, Mr. McKinnon. They need you. They need both of us. Donald met her eyes. Please come back. Kimberly shook her head. I can't work for someone who treats me like that. Who fires me for loving his children. I'll never do it again. You say that now, but the next time you come home and feel uncomfortable or threatened, or there won't be a next time. Donald's voice was firm. Because I'm not leaving anymore. Kimberly stared at him. What? I'm canceling my travel. All of it. Seattle, Dallas, Norfolk. I'm staying home. Kimberly's eyes narrowed. For how long? A week? A month? Until the next big deal comes up? Donald shook his head. I'm stepping back from the business. Promoting my VP to COO. He can handle operations. I'll consult remotely when necessary. But I'm staying home. Kimberly looked at him like she didn't believe him. Why would you do that? Because money can't fix this. Donald's throat tightened. I've spent 2 years throwing money at the problem. Millions of dollars. And it did nothing. You spent 6 weeks just being there. And you brought them back. That's what they need. Presence. Not a father who shows up twice a month with guilt and checkbooks. He paused. That's what I need to learn. And I can't learn it from Seattle. Kimberly was quiet for a long moment. Those girls have been through hell, Mr. McKinnon. They lost their mother. They shut down for 18 months. They just started healing. And today you terrified them. I know. If I come back, things have to be different. They will be. Kimberly's voice was firm. I need your word that you won't undermine me. That you'll trust me with them. That you'll be there, actually there, not just physically present while your mind is somewhere else. You have my word, and if you fire me again, I'm gone for good. No second chances. Understood. Kimberly studied his face, searching for sincerity. This isn't about money, she said. You can't pay me enough to come back if you're not going to change. I know. Donald's voice was raw. This isn't about money. It's about my daughters. And I've already lost too much time. Kimberly looked down at the drawings in her hands. At the stick figures and flowers and butterfly. When she looked back up, her eyes were wet but clear. I'll come back, but not for you. For them. That's all I'm asking. Kimberly nodded slowly. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. I'll be there. She started to close the door, then paused. Mr. McKinnon? Yes? Those girls love you, even when they're afraid. Even when they're silent, they're watching you, waiting to see if you'll stay. Donald's vision blurred. I will. I promise. Kimberly closed the door quietly. Donald stood in the hallway for a moment, his chest tight, his hands shaking. Then he pulled out his phone and called his VP. The call went to voicemail. Donald waited for the beep. Garrett, it's Donald. We need to talk tomorrow. I'm restructuring my role. You're taking over day-to-day operations. I'll explain everything in the morning. But I'm done traveling. I'm staying home. He hung up and walked back to his car. By the time he got home, it was past midnight. The house was dark and silent. Donald climbed the stairs and stood outside the girls' room. Through the crack in the door, he could see them. All three in one bed. Holding each other, eyes closed. He wanted to go in. To tell them Kimberly was coming back. To promise he'd be better. But he didn't, because words didn't matter anymore. Only actions did, and tomorrow, he'd start proving it. Kimberly arrived at 8 o'clock sharp. Donald answered the door himself. No housekeeper, no assistant, just him, standing there in jeans and a t-shirt instead of his usual suit. Kimberly looked at him, surprised. Good morning, he said quietly. Good morning. They're upstairs. They don't know you're coming. Kimberly nodded and stepped inside. The house felt the same as yesterday. Silent, heavy, like all the air had been sucked out. Donald led her up the stairs to the girls' room. He knocked softly, then opened the door. The triplets were sitting on the floor, still in their pajamas, holding hands in their familiar circle. Their eyes were distant, empty. Girls, Donald said gently. Someone's here to see you. They didn't look up. Kimberly stepped into the room. Good morning, sweethearts. Laura's head snapped up first. Her eyes went wide. Then Karen. Then Emily. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Laura screamed. Miss Kimberly, if this moment moved you, if you felt relief instead of entertainment, then unsubscribing would be dishonest. This channel isn't for casual viewers. It's for people who stay until healing happens. Subscribe. Or tell me why you won't. She scrambled to her feet and ran across the room, crashing into Kimberly's legs so hard she almost knocked her over. Karen and Emily were right behind her, all three girls wrapping themselves around Kimberly, crying and talking and holding on like they'd never let go. You came back, Emily sobbed. We thought you were gone forever. You left and we thought, Karen couldn't finish the sentence. Kimberly knelt down, pulling all three girls into her arms. I'm here, sweethearts. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Laura pulled back, tears streaming down her face. Daddy made you leave. We saw him. We heard him yelling. Kimberly glanced at Donald, who stood frozen in the doorway, his face wrecked. Your daddy made a mistake, Kimberly said softly. But he fixed it. He came to find me. He asked me to come back. The girls looked at their father. Not with fear this time, but with something else. Uncertainty. Hope. Donald's throat was so tight he could barely speak. I'm sorry, he managed. I'm so sorry I scared you. I was wrong. Emily let go of Kimberly and walked slowly toward him. Are you going to make her leave again? Donald shook his head. No, never. Emily studied his face for a long moment, then reached out and took his hand. Karen and Laura followed. One by one, the girls surrounded their father, holding his hands, pressing close. Donald knelt down so he was at their level. "I'm staying home now," he said. "No more trips. No more leaving. I'm going to be here." Laura's voice was small. "Promise?" "I promise." She threw her arms around his neck. Karen and Emily joined, all three girls holding him tight. Donald closed his eyes and held them back, tears streaming down his face. Over their heads, he met Kimberly's eyes. "Thank you," he mouthed. She nodded. The next weeks were different. Donald canceled everything. The Seattle expansion, the Dallas contract negotiations, the Norfolk terminal deal. His VP, Garrett, took over operations. Donald worked from home, taking calls in his study but always with the door open. Always available when the girls needed him. He learned their routines. Breakfast at 7:30, lessons with their tutor in the morning, lunch in the kitchen, free time in the afternoon. He learned to sit quietly while Kimberly worked with them. To not interrupt, to not take over, to just be present. He learned that presence was harder than he'd thought. It meant putting down his phone when Karen wanted to show him a drawing. It meant listening to Emily's endless questions even when he didn't know the answers. It meant letting Laura climb into his lap during story time and just holding her without thinking about the emails piling up. It meant being uncomfortable, being uncertain, being inadequate, but also being there. The kitchen became the center of the house again. Every afternoon, Kimberly would cook with the girls. Simple things: cookies, pancakes, grilled cheese sandwiches, and they'd sing while they worked. Donald would sit at the island, laptop open but ignored, watching them. Karen would stand on a stool, carefully measuring flour. Emily would crack eggs, concentrating so hard her tongue stuck out. Laura would stir, humming off-key. And Kimberly would move between them, guiding without controlling, laughing at their mistakes, celebrating their successes. The kitchen was loud now. Messy, chaotic, flour on the floor, dishes in the sink, three girls talking over each other, arguing about whose turn it was to add the chocolate chips. It was imperfect, and it was beautiful. One evening in late June, Donald stood in the kitchen doorway watching them. The girls were making pizzas. Personal-sized, each one designed exactly how they wanted. Karen's had pepperoni arranged in a perfect spiral. Emily's had so much cheese it was overflowing. Laura's had vegetables spelling out her name. They were laughing, arguing good-naturedly, being loud and messy and completely alive. Kimberly caught Donald's eye and smiled. "You want to make one?" Donald hesitated, then nodded. He washed his hands and joined them at the counter. Laura handed him a ball of dough. "Okay, Daddy, you have to stretch it like this." She demonstrated, her small hands working the dough with surprising skill. Donald tried to copy her. His pizza came out lopsided and uneven. The girls giggled. "That's okay, Daddy," Emily said generously. "It'll still taste good." They put their pizzas in the oven and sat together at the kitchen table while they baked. Karen leaned against Donald's side. Emily rested her head on his arm. Laura climbed into his lap. And for the first time since Colleen died, Donald felt something he'd forgotten existed. Peace. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. Not because the grief was gone. It wasn't. But because he was here. Present. Connected. And that was enough. Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Donald found Kimberly in the kitchen cleaning up. He picked up a dish towel and started drying. They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Donald spoke. "I spent years thinking money could fix everything. That if I just worked hard enough, made enough, I could protect them from anything." Kimberly rinsed a plate and handed it to him. "But the thing they needed most," Donald continued, "was the one thing money couldn't buy. Time. Presence. Me." He set the plate down and looked at her. "You taught me that. Thank you." Kimberly smiled. "You're a good father, Mr. McKinnon. You just forgot for a while." Donald's throat tightened. "Call me Donald, please." She nodded. "Donald." They finished the dishes together. And upstairs, three little girls slept peacefully, no longer holding each other like they were afraid someone would disappear. Because finally, everyone was staying.